I will never forget that Christmas. I was there, watching everything unfold like a story that only the elders could have warned us about. It began with excitement, the kind that fills the air when city families return to the village for the holidays. The roads, usually quiet, would soon echo with the sounds of laughter, car tires rolling over the red earth, and greetings exchanged between those who had been apart for a year. That year, it was the family of Mr. John Chibuzo that everyone anticipated. He was a man of great pride, a successful businessman in the city who always returned home in a polished car, his wife and children dressed in fine clothes. His wife, Yuju, was different. While John believed in his wealth and ability to handle any situation, Yuju believed in God. She was a woman of deep faith, one who would wake at dawn to pray while her family still slept. It was 2 weeks to Christmas, and their home in the city was alive with excitement. The children Ichima, Ada, and little Ifear ran around, packing and repacking their bags, dreaming of village adventures. Yuju, as always, prepared everything carefully, cooking snacks for the journey, making sure nothing was forgotten. But something troubled her. "John," she said one evening, folding clothes into a suitcase. "Let us pray before this journey." "I don't feel at ease." John scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. "Yuju, please. Must everything be about prayers? We travel every year, and nothing has ever happened. God knows we are going. He doesn't need reminders." Yuju sighed but said nothing. She simply knelt by the bedside and whispered a quiet prayer, asking for protection. The night before their journey, an unusual event occurred. Mr. John was driving home when he saw an old woman standing by the roadside, waving him down. She wore a faded wrapper tied tightly around her waist, her feet covered in dust. "Where are you going, Mama?" he asked, lowering his window. "My son," she said, her voice carrying the weight of age, "I need to go down the next street. Can you take me?" John nodded. She climbed in, settling herself quietly. They drove in silence until she finally spoke. "My son, do not travel to your village this Christmas. If you must go, you and your family must fast and pray before the journey. There is danger ahead." John laughed, shaking his head. "Mama, every year people try to scare others with stories. I have driven to the village many times. Nothing will happen." The old woman looked at him for a long moment, her eyes dark and unreadable. "I have warned you," she said. "The rest is in your hands." The next morning, the family prepared to leave. Yuju, as usual, gathered everyone to pray. John sighed, tapping his car keys against his palm impatiently. "Yuju, must you always do this? We are not going to war." But Yuju ignored him, bowing her head. "Lord, cover us with your protection as we travel today." John rolled his eyes. But as he stepped outside and turned the key in the ignition, nothing happened. The car refused to start. He tried again. Silence. Frustrated, he called a mechanic. After several minutes of inspection, the mechanic shook his head. "Okay, the engine has knocked. This car isn't moving today." John's face twisted in confusion. "How is that possible? It was fine yesterday." Yuju's voice was soft but firm. "Maybe God does not want us to go." John glared at her. "Enough of that. We will take a commercial bus." By afternoon, they arrived at the bus park, their bags packed into the storage compartment of a large vehicle bound for the village. As they boarded, Yuju did something that embarrassed John greatly as she asked the passengers to pray. "Please," she said, "let us pray before we begin this journey. Some passengers nodded, closing their eyes, while others ignored her. John groaned, pulling his cap lower over his face. As the bus roared to life and pulled onto the highway, the journey started peacefully. The children laughed, pointing at passing trees, the scent of roasted maize from roadside vendors drifting through the open windows. Then, everything changed. A few hours into the journey, the driver's voice cut through the calm. The brakes. The brakes are not working. Panic spread through the bus like wildfire. Passengers screamed as the vehicle began swerving uncontrollably. The driver gripped the wheel, fighting to keep the bus steady. Ahead, a tanker truck loomed, its massive body blocking the road. Jesus! Someone shouted. Yuju clutched her children, her lips moving in silent prayer. John's heart pounded. This was real. Death was coming. Then, as if an unseen hand intervened, the bus swerved at the last moment, skidding onto a patch of grass before coming to a shuddering halt. Silence. Slowly, passengers opened their eyes, realizing they were alive. John turned to Yuju, his hands shaking. He did not have the words, but he knew he had been wrong. That night, as they found a safe place to rest, news reached the village of what had happened. Among those who heard was Mama Maka, John's stepmother. She had long harbored resentment against him, believing his success had overshadowed her son's. That year, she had gone deep into the forest to visit the village witches, seeking their help to stop John from returning. John's heart pounded. This was real. Death was coming. Then, as if an unseen hand intervened, the bus swerved at the last moment, skidding onto a patch of grass before coming to a shuddering halt. Silence. Slowly, passengers opened their eyes, realizing they were alive. John turned to Yuju, his hands shaking. He did not have the words, but he knew he had been wrong. That night, as they found a safe place to rest, news reached the village of what had happened. Among those who heard was Mama Maka, John's stepmother. She had long harbored resentment against him, believing his success had overshadowed her son's. That year, she had gone deep into the forest to visit the village witches, seeking their help to stop John from returning.